All right, let's get started. Um, Today we're going to talk about P6-Loader and how it can make use of P6 easier and faster within your organization. I'm Ian Nicholson. I'm VP Solutions at Emerald Associates. I've got many years of international experience. I do a lot of work with risks and turnarounds. And a big part of why we created this tool is because that when rolling P6 out in a lot of different industries, we found we had need to build databases very quickly for our customers. Joining me today is Sue Familia. Sue's from our Wyoming office. Sue has many years experience as well, works in turnarounds, IT, and capital programs. And Sue is a subject matter expert when it comes to P6 and to a P6-Loader. So let's talk a little bit about the struggles people have when they're working with P6. Now, P6 is a great tool. I mean, it's been around for over 20 years now. People know it, people love it, but it has some challenges. So the first one is administering the system can be an absolute nightmare, particularly when you have multiple databases. So we have clients who have, in the extreme case, we have a client who has about 30 different databases, one for each client that they work for, and they need to be able to copy their structures, their coding, their layouts, their user profiles, all that sort of thing from one database to another when they create a new database for a new customer. Now that in the old way of doing things in P6 where everything had to be manually created was a very tedious process. But with P6-Loader, they can do it very quickly. The next thing is it can be a challenge to develop projects. And when I talk about developing projects, I'm talking about I've got a new project I need to get in the system. Maybe I've got it's an engineering project and I've got hundreds or thousands of work packages that I need to load into the system. I've got user-defined fields I need to create, all that sort of thing. And I can do that very quickly using P6-Loader. You know, I can import all of those activity code libraries, all that sort of thing in a very quick manner. I can build an EPS, OBS, WBS, any of the structures I need very, very quickly. The next challenge is integrating data to P6. You know, no software system exists in a vacuum. And a lot of times what people want to do is they want to be able to move data in and out of P6. And that's not that easy. In P6 out of the box, it's easy enough to get information out because you can create a report and dump it to Excel. But it's quite a bit more difficult to get information into P6. And there's been various options out there. But P6-Loader makes it very, very easy to get information in and out of P6. The next one is team engagement. Now, I mentioned before that P6 is well loved in the industry, and those of us who use it every day find it pretty easy to use. But for people who've never used it before, in fact, P6 has a very steep learning curve, and it's very difficult for somebody who only logs in once a month to remember what they have to do. So, on the other hand, everyone knows how to use Excel. So, instead of messing around in P6 and trying to progress their activities and remember where they have to go and go through all the menus and make sure they got everything done, they can just take Excel and just upload their progress that way. And a lot of our clients do that. Ironically, there used to be a tool in P3 called Primavera Mailbox or Primavera Mail that would actually let you email out to somebody a request for status update and they would fill it in and email it back, but that never made it to P6. And a lot of our clients do exactly that. They export the project to Excel, break it up by the people that they want to have do updates, get the Excel sheets back, and load them into P6. The next one is having consistent portfolios. Now, we get a lot of calls these days for people who are heavily invested in a data warehouse, and maybe it's SAP Power BI, maybe it's any of these other systems out there that basically people want to be able to get the data that sits in P6 and leverage it in their corporate BI systems. And now that's something that can be a real challenge when you've got to set up some consistent structures. So you need to go and backfill activity codes or user-defined fields or EPS structures or WBS structures to align all of your projects. So when they go out to your your business intelligence software, they make sense. So P6-Loader allows you to do that backfill very quickly and very easily. So I can pull everything out to Excel, I can add the fields that I need in, or I can update the fields that I need, and I can load everything back in. And I can even do that with baselines, which is something that opens up a whole new world of possibilities, right? I can go in and add an activity code to a project, but I can also add it to the baselines of that project. So let's talk about how P6-Loader works. So first of all, there's a bunch of options as to how P6-Loader can be implemented. If your P6 is on premise, we can just put everything there. P6-Loader can be installed basically in the same place you've got your P6 database. It runs on web services or Primavera APIs. So it basically just communicates just like a client would. Now, if you have your P6 in the cloud, or you don't want to install P6 locally, P6-Loader, sorry, can be installed in the cloud, or P6-Loader can be installed locally with P6 in the cloud. Or what you can have is you can have both in the cloud. So there's many options as to how we organize this thing. So it's very flexible in the way that it works. Now let's talk a little bit about the technology. So the first thing is that let's talk a little bit about the history of getting information in and out of P6. So to start with, there really was no way to get information into P6. So people started complaining, and Primavera bought out something called the SDK. The SDK stood for Software Developers Kit. And it was actually a reasonable tool for the time, but it had some challenges. So the first one was that there was no security around it. You had to be an admin super user to use it, which basically meant that you accessed absolutely everything in the system. So a person with access to the SDK could do a lot of damage if they didn't know what they were doing. It was also difficult to use. The way you had to open a project and everything, and it made it very cumbersome to use. And it's so old now that it's no longer supported by Oracle. In fact, they're recommending you not use it. It does still work on some of the modules, but doesn't work on others. So it's a bit of a difficult tool to work with these days. So then P6 or Primavera came out with P6 XL import export. Now that works fairly well, except again, it's got some challenges. The first one is that it doesn't access global data other than your resource dictionary. So if you want to upload a global activity code with it, you can't do it. If you want to edit your EPS, you can't do it. It only works basically at the project level. Now it is validated, which is a good thing. So, if you put some bad data in there, it will refuse to import it. It is supported by Oracle. It does allow you to do selective extraction and uploads, which is all great, but it's one project at a time. So if you have multiple projects or you want to edit a baseline, it's not going to help you. So then Primavera came out with the XML import-export process. Now that process is reasonably good. It does validate the data. It is supported by Oracle, but again, it's got some challenges. It's only project level. There's no security around it. So, you have to be a project super user to be able to import it into a current project. And once you have that, you've access to everything. It doesn't allow you to selectively extract. You basically have to take the whole project. And it's one project at a time again. You can actually take multiple projects, but as soon as you do, all the features that allow you to edit anything get turned off. Now, right from day one, we've had XER-based tools. So XER is Primavera's standard import-export format, and it's designed to be used to move data from one Primavera system to another. Now, along the way, people said, well, it's a text file. We can edit this text file. But there's a few risks there. So the first one is, it's to move project data from one database to another, so it doesn't access any global data. There's no security around it. If you can import, you can import anything. There's no data validation either. So if you make a mistake, you could corrupt your entire database. And we actually had this happen to one of our clients where someone decided they would edit an XER and change a code from being an EPS level code to being a global level code. Unfortunately, they spelt the word global incorrectly. They just inverted two of the letters. And it imported, but then as soon as anybody tried to log into P6 and it tried to read the the activity code dictionary, it came across this value it didn't know what to do with, and it just shut down. And it took us a couple of days to figure out what had happened and how to fix it. So in that example, you have to be very, very careful when you're working with XCRs, and you should never just go and manually edit an XCR. Now, it does let you get into multiple projects, but because there's a risk of screwing up your data, Oracle doesn't support this approach. So finally, P6-Loader. Well, P6-Loader allows you to access any data within P6. It works with the P6 security model. So if you don't have access to work on a project in P6, you won't have access through P6-Loader either. It validates all of the data through the APIs or web services. It's fully supported by Oracle. In fact, it's even sold on the Oracle Cloud Marketplace. It allows selective extraction, and you can download and upload as few or as many projects as you want. Now, there's different subject areas within P6-Loader. So I talked about these a little before. So first of all, we have the global subject area, which is all of our EPS, OBS, our calendars, our users, our layouts, all that sort of thing. Then we have resources and roles. We have project and activity information, and then we have some utilities as well. And I'll talk about each of these areas as we go. So just a high-level overview, or maybe not so high-level overview here. I'm not going to read through all the items, but these are the things that you can do within the system. Now, I'm just going to talk a little bit about the utilities section, because Sue will talk through all of these various areas as we go. But in the utilities, we also have the ability to roll down activity codes and calendars, which means if you have a global calendar, you want to make it a project calendar, you can. Or if you have a global activity code, you want to make a project activity code, you can. We can read and write XCRs and XMLs. We can clean up XCRs. We can run job services. So job services means that you can maybe run an entire load into your system of progress, and then you can run the job service to reschedule the project at the end. So it allows you to do all those things that you can do in P6, like schedule, level, summarize, all those kind of things. Even export to XML can be done as a job service. You can move layouts and reports and filters from one database to another. And you can even back up the database if you want to. So we talked about the different subject areas. Let's talk about global, user, and project topics. So if I want to extract my projects, I can extract one project, or I can extract many projects. If I want to, I can extract every project in the whole database. I can extract my baselines with the projects if I choose. I can extract the resources, the expenses, the logic, basically anything in the project I can export into Excel. Once I've actually worked with the data, so I can add additional data, I can edit the data, I could run some macros on the data if I want. I can pull information from another system, and I load everything back in, and I'm done. Now, it's important to understand here, I don't actually have to extract before I can load. If all I want to do is, for example, take SAP work orders and move them into P6, I just have to simply take a dump out of SAP using a variant, run a little macro to put it in the right format, load it up, and now my work orders are in P6. So let's take a look. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand this over to Sue, who's going to walk through some of the functionality. If you have any questions as she's going through, feel free to put them in the chat, and we'll make sure that we get them answered. So there's a chat, and there's actually a question section as well. And anything you put in there, we'll make sure we get covered at the end of the class. Okay, Sue, I've given you control.
So I have P6-Loader login page up here. And as Ian had indicated, we go through the API or web services to a particular database. So what we can do is we can actually point this tool at several different databases so that you can utilize the tool on different databases if you have more than one database. So you would just select, just like you would with P6, the database you want to work with, and then log in. So I think that the first place that makes sense is to go into the extraction module. So when I go into the extraction module, you can see those subject areas that Ian was referring to. So we can get user information from the security profiles to the user to assigning them project or EPS, responsible managers, and also set their resource access. We can get at a myriad of that global information that a lot of people might want to take a look at. We can handle OBS, EPS, our spending and benefit plans, change logs, things like that. We can also take a look at our project codes, including the dictionaries, activity codes and dictionaries. I'm going to actually do an example on this activity code roll down, user-defined fields, calendars, etc. With roles and resources, we can work with any of that type of information with P6-Loader. If you do use any of the risk information in P6, we have that available. And I'm going to come back to this usage in just a moment. We have project information as well as activity information, including, resource assignments, expenses, steps, things like that. Now, when I am working with project information and I want to work with a particular project, let's say, any project in my database, on the right-hand side is where all of my projects are located. So I could either search. So if I wanted to do, P6-Loader, it's going to go in, it's going to highlight, and it's going to narrow it down for me. If I know the project that I'm going after, I could put that entire project there, or I could also just drill down as I go. So these are my EPS, and let me go down to my P6-Loader. And then once I get down to the lower level, I can see my projects that are there. So I could choose, several projects. I could choose, maybe an entire EPS if I wanted to work with all of those projects, or, I could do one. So very flexible in the project data that you can work with there. Now, I'm just going to bring out a couple of sheets so that we can see what it looks like when we bring out information on any type of module. And I'm just going to use the OBS and EPS as an example. This is global data, so I don't need to associate a project with it. So I've selected those, and I'm going to do an extraction here. So P6-Loader is going to go out, it's going to extract that data, and when it's got it, it's going to tell me it's completed, and then I'm able to download that spreadsheet that P6-Loader created for those two modules. So I have a tab for each module selected. I've got my OBS and my EPS. So this is what is in there right now. And I've got some different color coding on my extraction that kind of helps you out, kind of coaches you a bit as you're working with this data. Now, if you come across a column header with a red background, this is indicating that this is required data in order for you to work with any of the data in the OBS. So at the very least, I have to have my OBS name in there. If it has an orange font on it, or reddish orange font, this allows me to remap what is in the required data. So if I wanted to rename EAI, I could maybe rename it Emerald or something. I could put that there, and when I load this back in, it will actually go out and change that name EAI to Emerald. Now, anything that is gray is informational. So in this case, I can see that we've got some modification data here. Now, I don't ever need to load this back in. So if I were to want to load something in on this sheet, I could remove these columns and it's not going to hurt anything because I don't have any data that's going to be loaded in. They're going to be changed. Now, with the ones with the blue font, these are items that are going to allow you to either load new data or change data, so edit data that's already there. So in this case, let's say this East plant, and I have 2018 there. Maybe I'm ready to change that description to 2019 or something. If I put 2019 in here, it's going to load back in 2019 and change that description on that OBS. Now I'm just going to pop into the EPS so you can see what different types, what that's going to look like differently than from the OBS. We can see here that these have it has 3 columns that are required. So in order to work with my EPS, I have to have the ID, the name, and the OBS ID that's associated with it, so responsible manager. Now, in the case that maybe I don't need to change anything on, let's say, my anticipated finish date or my anticipated start date, when a column header is blue, you're going to be able to actually remove that from your sheet, and it's not going to affect any of your data loads. So maybe I don't need to deal with these, and I just want to kind of simplify my data that I'm loading in so I can just concentrate on what I'm looking at. I could go ahead and I could delete that, and it's still going to come in there with no problem. Now in this one, I have some more information here. So I have summary data. So all those roll-ups and things that you find in P6 for your EPS, this is going to bring out just some of that data. And it's informational, but again, it's something that maybe you might use as you're working with the sheet and doing some changes and things like that. So we've provided that summary data there for you. I can remove that if I need to. So you can see that we've got quite a bit out here that we can see at the summary level. So I'm not going to make any changes right now. I'm going to go over another one of the this is what I would consider like administrative type of thing. Another administrative type of thing might be is maybe some database cleanup. So with database cleanup, I'm going to go ahead and just close this one down. I don't need it anymore. And I'm going to go to my P6 that I have right now. And I've got this project called Roll Down Project. And when I go in there, I can see that I've got some activity codes that are kind of a mess here. Now this happens as you go forward in using your P6 environment. Sometimes, people don't realize there's a code already out there. They create another code that's a duplicate, and then it gets assigned in, with both of those codes to the same project, and it gets quite confusing. So in order to clean this up, I have those usage sheets that I talked about earlier on my extraction area. So if I wanted to just clean up in general my usage on, or my UDFs, my activity codes, my global calendars, resources, roles, etc., what I can do as an administrator is I can perhaps run an analysis of where my activity codes are being used, by which projects, and how many times. So in this case, I would say, okay, I want to see what the usage is. And then I could either choose the entire database, which is going to take a while, of course, to run, or I could just check sections of the database. So let's say I wanted to go to my P6-Loader area, and I just want to bring out what is in my demo area. I could submit this, and it's going to bring out the information that for activity code usage for these 4 projects. So I don't want to run this now because it does take a little bit of time, because P6 is going out and it's checking every one of them. But once I do get that information out, I can decide, can I remove a code? Do I have some duplicates that are happening there? And do I need to clean them up? So in the case of where I just showed you this project where I have some kind of mess with my codes. I've got a phase code. This phase code actually is more the subject area where it needs to be isn't at the global level. It needs to be actually at an EPS level because it's only going to affect the project or it's only needed for the projects in a particular EPS. Now you can see I've got two equipment codes that are here. They're at different levels, but they indicate the same thing. They have dictionaries, and each one of them are actually needed for the assignments in this project. So I can combine these two and I can put it at the level where I want it to. And in this case, I am going to take it to the EPS level. I've got the same going on with my specs. I have duplicate lists here, and but they're both assigned. So I want to combine those. And actually, these are only important at my project level. And then at my work order, this is a code that is only going to be important to this project. We don't normally reuse work order numbers from project to project. So I want to push that down as well. Now, the way I can do that is by using my activity code roll down sheet. And what this is going to do is it's going to tell P6 what to do with those codes and how I want to clean them up. So here's my phase code. And right now it resides at the global level. So I want to push that down to my EPS level. And just to make it clear, I'm going to give it a new name. So my new code name is going to be this one that's appended with new. On my equipment IDs, I have the original scope. I'm going to take them down to the EPS level, and then I'm going to give them the same name. What that tells P6-Loader to do is to combine those dictionaries, reassign those with that new code name in the projects where it resides, and put that new code at the EPS level. Now, of course, I'm going to need to tell it what EPS I want it to be associated with. So I'm going to give it an EPS ID. Now, for my specs, the same thing is basically going to happen. I'm going to combine them into the same name, and I'm going to put that code at the project level, and then I'm going to tell it which project I want it to be associated with. And then for my global work order, I'm just going to say I want to push that down to the project level. I'm not going to give it a new name in this case, so it's just going to keep the original name, and then it's going to become a project code of the project roll down, or the roll down project. Now, this last column here is telling P6-Loader what I want to do with that original code. So maybe I want to make sure that my phase and my equipments and my specs are all cleaned up and they're reassigned before I actually delete them at those original levels. So I'm going to say I want to keep them. So I'm going to say that it's false. I don't want to delete them. However, for the work order, I do want to delete that. I'm just rolling it down. I know this is the only project where this is assigned. And so I'm going to go ahead and delete this work order at my global level and just maintain it at my project. So in order to run any type of data into P6 with P6-Loader, you go to the upload area. You're going to save the data that the workbook that you want to make changes with. And then you're going to go, and I need to get to the right place. You're going to browse to where that is. And you're going to select that particular upload file, and then tell P6-Loader to upload it. P6-Loader is going to go out. It's going to make the changes or create if you're creating something new. And when it's finished, it's going to tell me that it's completed. I can go back to P6 and I can refresh my data because this hits the database directly. So I have to bring that new data into P6 by doing a refresh. Now you can see those codes are gone now. So, but I've created them elsewhere. So I'm going to go into my columns here and I'm going to take a look at my EPS codes. There's my new equipment code. And here is my phase code. Now, if I'm looking at my global area, I no longer have that work order code here, but it is now pushed down to my project area. So here's my specs as well as my work order. Now, when I say OK, I can see where my phase code has been pushed down and reassigned. My equipment codes have been combined and they're assigned still, but they're all contained in that one code. The same goes for my specs. And then, of course, here's my work order with all of my assignments there. But now this does reside at the project level. So that's just some of the admin and the cleanup that we might want to, kind of visit there. Now, when you're developing a project, there are a lot of different types of information that you may want to put in when you are developing a project. So I'm just going to go change this layout really quick so we can see some of the things that we might want to be setting up for a brand new project. So I'm probably, we're going to want to assign a calendar. We're going to want to put some durations, maybe some steps, some logic, assign roles and resources, maybe use some cost accounts, and maybe start some planning. So that's quite a bit. And then in conjunction with that, I actually need to build out my resource dictionary. So I have this P6-Loader parent here, and I'm going to create some resources with some different calendars and things on it in order to create my project. Now, I have a sheet or a workbook that's going to do all this for me. Do keep in mind that you do not have to load this information all at once. If all I have is the beginnings of my WBS structure and I want to get that started going into my project, I could just load my WBS sheet. So we don't have to do this all at once, but this is just a good example of the different things that you might be wanting to create when you are doing a new project. So I have my WBS here. I'm building out my WBS, and I've got the ability to do some hierarchy. I have all those pieces that for earned value and all that I could set on my WBS. So quite a number of things, anything I might want to do with that WBS. Now, with this project, I actually am in need of creating some new activity codes. And these are going to be project level activity codes. So I'm going to tell it which project I want it to be associated with. And then once they're created, I can then populate their dictionaries. So you can see that for my discipline dictionary, I have some code values, I have some descriptions. For my area and my work packages as well. Now, of course, when you're setting up a project, you might see that, okay, I'm ready to do my activities on this. So I've got my WBS already defined here. So I'm going to put those activities, including their ID, into a WBS. I'm going to name it. I'm going to assign codes because I can assign both project level codes, activity level codes, as well as user defined fields to each one of my activities. Now I'm also using some functionality of Excel to help me build out my project name. Now I can do this right within the sheet, and in this case I'm using a concatenate. So I've added this column. That column is not a typical column that comes out or is handled with P6-Loader. But since I've named it title, P6-Loader does not understand that that is a piece of information that it needs to load back into P6. So it's going to ignore it. It doesn't see it. So when it's coming through and it's reading all of this, it's just going to skip over this column. However, I'm also using my project code for my area as well as my work package. And by using the concatenate, it's building out my name. Now, when you have a function that is defined in a column, you do not have to copy and paste. Okay, so it looks like we had a bit of an issue there. Can you still hear me, Valerie?
I can hear you, Sue.
Okay, then I'm going to go ahead and continue. It looks like we had a little bit of a glitch there. So the next thing I might want to do is go into my activity expenses. I'm assuming let me just repeat really quickly. I don't have to take the value that is returned as a result from the function. P6-Loader will actually load the value and not the function on there. So I don't have to copy and paste values once I've used a function in Excel. I'm going to go and I'm going to put some expenses on my activities that I'm creating. In conjunction with that, it looks like I'm using some cost accounts, but I need to actually build out that cost account table. So I can do that. I have some steps that are necessary. And so with each one of my activity IDs, I have some steps that go along with it. Maybe in the case of, let's say, my activities, I have the same steps required for several activities. And so I'm going to just simply copy and paste. And then I might want to, put my new activity in there. And I knew it was going to do that. So let me so now I've used the functionality again with Excel to build out my repetitive steps on several different activities for me. I also need a new resource calendar for this particular project. I have some resources that are going to be working a rotating schedule, 10 on and 4 off. Now, if you've ever went out and defined a rotating calendar, you know how it can be fairly difficult. You've got to count out, each day, make sure that those are the work days, count out those next 4, say that they're non-work. And if you miscount, you basically have to start over because it's really hard to kind of get them all jockeyed around and correct it again. Now, with a calendar, we have 3 different sheets that work with the calendar. The first one is just defining the calendar itself. So I'm making this a resource calendar. I've given it a type of resource, and I've defined those hours out there for this calendar. Now, on my calendar weekday, this is how I define work time in my calendar. So potentially, this calendar could work Sunday through Saturday, and they are going to be working 8 to 5:30. My last section, or my last tab here, is where my exceptions come in. So again, I've used functionality of Excel to make sure that these are accurate. I've taken my first day off, and then I've added one to it for my next 4 days. When I have my next set of days off, I've again used a formula to calculate that next set of days off, and then incremented those. So this is going to allow me to be more accurate when I am setting those exception dates, and I'm not going to have to go back and try to fix it if I count wrong. It's going to count for me. Now, I also need a new resource code for this particular project. So I'm going to set up a contractor resource code. And I'm going to build out the dictionary, and I can even put hierarchy in it if I need to. Then I need, of course, some resources for this particular project. So I'm creating resources, and you can see I'm putting it underneath that P6-Loader area there. I am assigning that calendar that I just showed you that I was creating, and I'm assigning my codes that I need as well. Now, P6-Loader doesn't matter what order you have any of these tabs down here. P6-Loader actually knows what order to load or create each piece of data in the right order. So it knows it needs to create my calendar before it can actually assign it. And it wouldn't matter if my calendar stuff was down here at the end or way at the beginning. It knows that it needs to do that first. Now, with my resources being created, I also want to assign them. So I've assigned them not only resources, but I've also put some roles in there. I've used some of my cost accounts, and I've also started out some planning for each one of my resources. So I'm starting to build out my budgeting or my budgeted units and duration and things like that. And then, of course, a project is not a project unless it has logic. So I can set up the logic between each one of my activities. Now, I can also handle cross-project relationships. So if I had this new project that needed to be, one activity needed to be maybe connected to another project activity on a different project, I could just put that different project ID in here and the activity ID that it needs to be connected to, and then it's going to then create that logic within. I can also put my type in. I need to put my type in, and then I could also assign lag as well. So pretty much everything I need for this project, I'm going to do in one load. Again, I wouldn't have to do this, but just for the sake of time and to be able to show you that fairly easily, I've done it in one load. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go out to that new project development project, and I'm going to upload that information. Now it's going out and it's creating everything. It's kind of telling me where it's working. So right now it's working on resource assignment. And then once it's completed, again, I'm going to go back and I'm going to refresh my data. So hitting an F5. And I can see where I have my new resources here. I've also got that new calendar that's been assigned. And then on my activities, I've got all of my activity information that's come through, including those budgeted areas, and as well as the successor details. With my logic, my roles, my resources, things like that. So everything I need for that project is done. All right, so another thing that we can work with is baselines. So I'm going to go ahead and open up this project that has a couple of baselines assigned in it and created. And we all know in some cases we have baselines that we need to adjust. Now, using the baseline update in P6 is not the easiest thing to deal with. It is sometimes cumbersome. Sometimes you don't really realize what it's changing or what it's going to change. So it gets to be kind of a little dicey. So you can disconnect that baseline and restore it as a project and make those changes, but that's also a little bit cumbersome. It's a lot of steps. So with P6-Loader, what I can do, and I'm going to go back to my extraction area here, is I can actually say I want to bring out those baseline projects. I don't have to restore it or anything like that. It's actually going to bring out those activities in that baseline for me. So what I've done in this case is I have some changes that I need to make to my baseline in this project, as well as I have some found work that I'm going to be putting in. So if I go and take a look at that sheet, you can see where I have brought out the baseline activities. So here's my project ID denoting that it is a baseline. And it's brought all of them out. In the case of where I want my found work, I can add it to both my project and my baseline at the same time. So I'm not putting any planned units or anything or costs in with that. I merely want to denote this as added work. Now, in the case of my other couple of activities here, I actually want to redistribute some costs as well as some units on those. So I've used the functionality again to do the math for me. So when I upload this new value to my planned labor costs, it's going to be accurate. Now, in this case, I'm showing all of my activities in this particular baseline. However, I'm only changing a handful. So what I would probably want to do is just assign the ones that do not have any changes left, or I would want to just load ones that didn't have any changes left. So I could save just these lines and then use that to load into my project. It's going to be a little bit simpler, a few less points when we're talking about loading this back in. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to load that baseline update. Okay, it's finished. So I can go out and I can refresh it again. And I can see where I have my new activity. See, I have added here. And then I also have my debits and my credits where I can see my variance on my units as well as my costs. So those came through and everything's looking good now. A lot easier than trying to use either that functionality in P6 to change the baseline or having to detach that baseline and restore it. Now, finally, I want to take a look at how you might want to do some updates with P6-Loader. So I have two projects here, and I've gotten my first update. However, I have users or people who are doing updates that aren't that don't use P6. So what I've done is I've created a sheet based on the information that I need them to work with when they're doing my updates. So in P6, I do this frequently. So I can extract the data every time I need to, and I can actually save what I want to extract each time. So if I do this all the time, I can see that I've got, let me get the right one here. Where's my update? Oh, project updates right there. So I do this all the time. I'm going to extract out what is currently in my project, and then I'm going to send out this information to the people who are going to give me that update and send it back to me. So because I do this all the time, I can save this definition, basically what columns I want to bring out. Maybe I'm doing the same projects each time. I can save all that. So if I load this, I'm going to show you what that looks like. I would go in and I would load it. It's just asking me if I want to discard my changes. And when I do this, I'm pulling out an activity sheet. So every module that has the little pencil by it allows me to customize what columns I want to bring out on that particular activity sheet, because there can be a lot, as you can see. So anything that's on the left is what would be available to put on my sheet, and anything on the right is what's actually going to be pulled out. So I can say I have my project ID, my activity ID, my name, the status, a % complete, an actual start and finish, a planned start and finish, and a suspend and resume if I need it. Now, when I look at my user-defined fields, I actually need none of those. So I don't have any in my area or my UDF columns here. So I'm not going to pull out any user-defined fields, nor am I going to pull out any of my codes. Now, for the projects that I want to use, I actually want to go and I want to take out in my P6-Loader area under my demo, I want to pull out that sheet and those columns for the 2 projects that I'm going to be having updates on. So if I wanted to keep those projects and have them be part of my definition every time, I could then go in and I could save and say, okay, I want to save these in my project updates. So I could tell it to save to that, and it's going to then maintain those projects the next time I go to run this. So I'm going to go ahead and extract, and it's going to bring out that information for me. Now, I've already essentially brought out that information, and I've sent off to the people who are going to update those particular activities. And maybe I have a user defined field or something. Maybe I want to narrow it down to a specific period that I want it to be updated for. And then I would provide this sheet to the people who are making the updates, and then they would fill it out and come back and bring it back to me. So this is a filled out one. I can see that I have my 2 start milestones that are completed. I have an actual start on those. And then I've got 2 that are in progress. So I've got 25% on this FP spread 1 and 10% on FP spread 3. And then you can see I do have 2 different projects that I'm actually doing the update on. Now, also in this case, I have some financial periods that I want to update some actual units in. So we can do this with P6-Loader as well. So on my earthworks for my FP spread 1, I have units in both May and June. And then for my FP spread 3, I want to put units in for all 3 of my resources in the month of June. So I can do that all at once. I can go ahead and go out and I can upload. And then once it is completed, I can see, let me just look at this FP spread 1. We can see that I have my financial periods out here that have zeros in them right now. My FPF or FS or F spread 3 is the same. And when I refresh this, it's going to come, it's going to put my progress in. And then in the case where I was updating my financial periods, I've now got those values in my financial periods for each one of those activities. So a lot of different things, and there's more that we could do out here. It's just that, you know, in the interest of time, I'm already at the end already. I want to make sure that I've got time for everyone to wrap up and to get done. Now you can see that I got a red here. It gave me a warning, and it's essentially telling me, you know, what happened with my load. There's some things I want to take a look at. And it's going to kind of guide me as to where those errors occurred. So it's going to also help coach you as well. So any questions at this point? I don't see any in the chat. So I'm going to go ahead and send it back to you, Ian, if you want to take control. We're pretty close to ending time, so I want to give you a chance to wrap up a bit.
Thanks, Sue. All right. So just a quick wrap up here. We get great feedback from our customers about P6-Loader. Some of them you know, we like to hear. Obviously, some of them are large clients, some are smaller clients. The one I really like is one on the bottom here, where the client says, "We finally got P6-Loader. I wish we did this 2 years ago." And that's a client I spent 2 years trying to convince that they really needed P6-Loader, and now they use it for all kinds of different things. You know, what we find from people is people are finding new ways to use P6-Loader all of the time. You know, all kinds of interesting things that people are doing with their data. We have very large clients, and as I said, very small clients using all kinds of different things with P6-Loader. Some of our customers listed here. We have companies all over the world who are actually using the tool. As I said, some of them, like Con Edison, for example, is a very large customer. And we have some, as I said, much smaller customers down to actually single users who've purchased it just to make their jobs easier. Now we can help with many different things. We're a full service Primavera provider. So we provide tools, services, and training on P6 and all of the Primavera tools for that matter. We've been around for a long time. We've been a Primavera solutions provider since 1995. We've been a partner since 2009. We have people all over the place, depending on where you are and what kind of support you need. And we do a number of different add-ons and integrations to Primavera tools. So at this point, if there's any questions, feel free to ask them. I don't see any at this point, but if you do have any questions, please feel free to throw them in the chat. And if you think of anything you'd like to ask us after the fact, I put Sue's contact information up, so you can reach out to Sue and discuss what questions you might have or any use cases, examples that you might be looking for. All right, so I guess we're good, Sue. As I said, if you have any questions, reach out to us. We'll be happy to answer them for you. Thanks for joining us today.